It seems that a lot of people in the automotive scene have grown to dislike Rocket Bunny as of recent, with it falling off about as fast as it came up. But it's worth asking the question of why? What made this style quickly fall out of fashion? Well, here's how it happened. Rocket Bunny isn't so much of a brand as it is a product line produced by TRA Kyoto, made possible with a very small crew, with the designer, Kei Miura, at the helm, who himself is a strange character to say the least. To explain how Rocket Bunny truly changed the game, we need to first look into the culture of the early 2010s. Years had gone by without a major change in terms of stylistic trends in the automotive scene, being over a decade removed from the millennium-era bell-bottom kits and the visual lobotomies that we would come to know now as sex spec. Most of the population had switched over to a more subtle stock body look, or taking elements from track cars. Though we would have some break the mold a little bit, with kits like Varis's V1 version of the Evo 10. But kits like these still try to color within the lines. Although they push a lot of our expectations to the extremes, they still tried to not rock the boat too much. By this point in time, the automotive scene was ready for something new and totally different. And Kei Miura would deliver. The Rocket Bunny PS13 kit. For those who weren't around at the time, or maybe who didn't spend every waking minute in their weekly computer class reading Speed Hunters instead of actually doing the work that was assigned to them, this kit was revolutionary, to say the least. Nothing else looked quite like it. It was hard to even place a single influence for it, coming across as a cultural melting pot of 80s Trans Am, Kaido racers, and I honestly can't think of a third. What made this kit pique the interest for many onlookers was that it was relatable. They were taking a car that was affordable to the mass population and making it entirely new. What was potentially the most impressive was the car they did it to, the S13. The S13 is a car that has never really left the public eye for its entire existence. From its beginnings, it has always been at the forefront of grassroots racing and automotive culture. It's a car that was used at the first drift event and will be used at the last. One that you could find today completely restored or owned by a scumbag teenager. Or in the 90s as a JGTC race car, and at the same time being crashed into a guardrail on a mountain pass. In a lot of ways, the S13 is the car of the people. Because of this, it has had quite possibly the most development a single car has ever seen in terms of body kits. For someone to completely change the script and execute it well on how they looked 2 decades after its release was genuinely surprising. But these kits would truly reach public consciousness with the release of the kit for the newly unveiled FRS and BRZ. This was a turning point for the automotive scene. Having a totally new car combined with off-the-wall styling brought many people in. What was most shocking was seeing someone take a car directly off the showroom floor and instantly cut it up. This single kit would set a precedent for how the next decade of car styling would look. As the kit grew in popularity and as the prices of these newly released cars would come down over time, it was only inevitable that someone would replicate it at some point. It didn't take long for a replica to be produced. Even as far back as 2012, there were people on the hunt for one. They quickly began overtaking the originals in terms of quantity, eventually culminating in the total takeover of these in the scene. If you saw a Rocket Bunny FRS, it was a wavy eBay wrap. This was the turning point for how the brand was viewed by the public. The repidemic. Let me explain. What made Rocket Bunny so special in those early days was its uniqueness and quality, and the replicas of the kit put those two necessary elements in jeopardy. The in-house builds produced by Miura-san were congruent and totally one of a kind. Even as someone who would not consider themselves a fan of the style or bolt-on over fenders in general, it's hard for me to not like a lot of these early demo cars and properly done builds. But when these kits became available to the wider population at a much lower price point, they were quickly hacked together on salvage title BRZs. Because of this, they became more of a staple of what people disliked about the modern car landscape, rather than what they did. When you saw a Rocket Bunny car in real life, it was much more likely to be a botched Technicolor ZN6 than a well-executed build at a show of some sort. This soured the taste of the Rocket Bunny aesthetic amongst the general population. To draw a comparison, we can look at RWB. Besides one having the obvious shock factor of chopping up a classic Porsche, the two share a lot of similarities. Both revolutionized the styling of a beloved car to better suit their interests. But where they differ is how these kits are perceived in modern times. Although they are becoming a tad overplayed, they are still viewed in a higher regard by most people. This comes down to their rarity and quality. If you weren't aware, to get an RWB car, you actually have to fly out the creator to install it himself by hand. This both limits the possibility of fakes as well as keeps the general quality of the builds quite high. There isn't really any poorly put together RWB. So when the thought of one comes to mind, even if you aren't a fan of the cars, it's more or less a positive one. Due to them being so uncommon and their cost of entry, there is a sense of quality associated with the brand. Rocket Bunny would be in a similar position, as someone who's willing to shell out up to $8,000 for a kit is pretty unlikely to skimp out in other areas. This effect is caused by the sheer quantity of reps that are out there. Supporting replicas directly puts the original products at risk. Although they may be expensive, the original kit is being designed and produced in-house by a single guy and only a handful of staff. Opting to save money directly puts a passionate designer in peril, whether that be from potential loss of revenue or a hit to the brand's image. While I don't think Varis is exactly swiping his EBT card, he should still be able to sow the fruits of his labor. The title may be a bit hyperbolic, but without the sheer quantity of reps, I would imagine the Rocket Bunny aesthetic would be in a lot different of a place socially. Even if someone were to buy a kit directly from the manufacturer and put it on their car, they will undoubtedly get quite a bit of pushback in the comments. Despite some of it coming from the growing rarity of a lot of the cars TRA makes kits for, I don't think this opinion would be quite as frequent if it weren't for the repidemic. Thankfully, the company still appears to be doing quite well, with a lot of the new designs being produced headed in a totally new direction, opting now for a more boxy design, and I'm intrigued for what they'll cook up next. Variety is the spice of life, so even if you're not a fan, hopefully you can still appreciate someone trying to change the game a little bit. But if you are, maybe reconsider buying that asbestos-filled kit from eBay. Thanks for watching.